What if your consciousness is not produced by your brain, but concentrated by it? We are used to thinking of consciousness as the exhaust smoke of neurons, matter first, mind second. Evolution tweaks the circuitry, and eventually, somehow, awareness flickers on. Science can describe how brains process information. It can map neurons firing, chemicals diffusing, networks synchronizing. But the question lingers like a faint echo in an empty room. Why would a biological machine need subjective experience at all? Why should computation feel like something from the inside? If we look at the world purely through the lens of objective observation, consciousness feels unnecessary. It is the hard problem. If evolution is just about survival, about passing on genes, why do we need to feel it? A biological computer could hunt, eat, reproduce, and build rockets without ever experiencing the sensation of the color red or the pang of nostalgia. There is a version of reality where you are just an automaton, a very complex, wet robot that acts as if it is sad, but inside, the lights are off. Large language models can process patterns without any inner glow. They generate text, simulate conversation, compose music. But we do not assume there is a private sunrise happening inside the server rack. So why would evolution need to invent one for us? But you know the lights are on. You are feeling something right now. Even if everyone else is a robot, you know you are here. So let's assume everyone else is here too. So let's ask the question, what if consciousness is not invented at all? This is where panpsychism gently enters the room, not as a doctrine, not as a conclusion, but as an invitation. It suggests that consciousness might not be something that emerges late in the story of the universe. It might be there from the beginning, not fully formed, not self-aware, but present in seed form, like mass, like charge, like gravity. Imagine mass. Every object has it. A pebble has less than a planet, but it is still there. Now imagine consciousness as something similar, a property that exists everywhere in varying degrees. Not thoughts, not emotions, but some primitive interiority. Under this lens, a brain would not create consciousness. It would organize it. It would concentrate it, like a lens focusing sunlight into a single burning point. Now I want to introduce a symbolic figure. We will call them the archivist. We will meet them properly later. For now, just hold the image of someone who collects moments and stores them in glass jars. Back to our ocean. Maybe not a metaphorical ocean, but actually try to picture a real one for a moment. Endless water in every direction. Now picture a wave forming on the surface. The wave rises, it has a shape, it has direction, it has a beginning and a peak, and what looks like an ending. If the wave could think, it might believe it was a separate thing. It might look at other waves and call them strangers. It might fear the moment it crashes onto the shore, because from the wave's perspective, that looks like death. But the wave was never separate from the ocean. It was always the ocean doing something temporary. And I wonder, just as an exercise, what would change if that's what we are? There was a philosopher named Baruch Spinoza who was excommunicated from his community in the 1600s for suggesting something that infuriated nearly everyone. He said God and nature were the same thing. Not a man in the sky, not a judge, not a personality, just the totality of what exists. This got him kicked out, as you might imagine, but the idea aged well. Einstein, centuries later, said when asked about God, "I believe in Spinoza's God." Not a God who watches, a God who is the watching, who is the thing and the awareness of the thing inseparable. If the ocean metaphor holds any water, then Spinoza's version is probably the closest thing to what it might actually feel like from the inside. Not worship, not obedience, just recognition. The way a wave, if it could suddenly perceive the whole ocean, wouldn't feel small. It would feel like it had been everything all along and had simply forgotten. If consciousness is fundamental, then birth might not be the creation of something new. It might be a gathering, a local thickening, a density increase in a universal field. And death might not be annihilation. It might be diffusion. This does not mean survival in the religious sense. It does not guarantee memory or identity. A wave does not keep its name after it dissolves, but the water remains. And perhaps identity was always the pattern, not the substance. Of course, if you look out the window, this feels absurd. Rocks do not look conscious. Atoms do not seem to whisper secrets. But history has humbled us before. The earth felt flat until we stepped back. The sun felt like it revolved around us until we zoomed out. Light seemed either wave or particle until it refused to choose. Again and again, reality has turned out to be stranger than our surface impressions. We are always incrementally wrong. We are getting closer to the truth. Yes, our theories are good enough to build rockets, which is amazing. But do we really think that in 100 years or a million years, our current understanding of the brain won't look as naive as a flat Earth map looks to us now? It is possible that the idea of galaxies and particles will one day seem as crude as medieval star charts. Perhaps the very distinction between matter and mind will dissolve. Let us imagine something else. Today, when we ask an AI system to solve a problem, it processes quietly and returns with an answer. We do not feel its internal steps. It runs simulations out of view. Now imagine a future where human minds could do something similar. Suppose we had some augmentation that allowed a portion of our awareness to branch off, simulate a scenario in detail, and return with the full memory compressed into a single insight. It would feel as though we had instant understanding, but beneath the surface, an entire inner life might have unfolded and concluded. What if our entire existence is something like that? What if the larger field of consciousness runs localized simulations, not out of boredom, not out of malice, but out of exploration, and what we call a lifetime is one of those simulations playing out in high resolution? Like Spinoza's God playing the game of being a person for a little while to see what it felt like. Now let us come back to the archivist. Imagine the archivist collecting every life as a jar on a shelf. Each jar contains a storm of memories. From inside the jar there is a sense of separation, a sense of I. But from outside they are all part of the same archive. Earlier I mentioned that strange question. Why would evolution need subjective experience? Let us turn the question around. What if evolution itself is something that appears within consciousness? What if awareness is not a late accident, but the stage on which accidents are noticed? You needed consciousness to even consider evolution, to model it, to debate it. In that sense, consciousness feels less like a product and more like a precondition. Now I want to do something slightly uncomfortable. Notice what has been happening during this video. You have been holding images, oceans, waves, jars, an archivist. You assembled them. You gave them coherence. You felt a subtle continuity between them. But none of those things were physically present. In a way, your mind has just simulated a small universe. You created a field of meaning out of patterns. You experienced something that did not exist outside of experience. If consciousness were fundamental, this would be exactly how it might operate, local patterns forming, dissolving, recombining. And here is the strange part. If the universe is a vast field of awareness generating local storms, then this moment, right now, is one of those storms wondering about itself. The wave asking whether it is water, the jar on the shelf briefly realizing it might be glass shaped around something much older. We began with a shocking possibility that you are not producing consciousness, you are a temporary concentration of it. Everything we've talked about today is a possibility. Maybe a beautiful one, maybe a wrong one, maybe one that will seem charmingly naive a million years from now, when some other civilization of evolved lizards or sentient moss is reflecting on what the early primates got wrong this time. But possibility is enough to be worth sitting with. And as you sit there considering that, feeling the weight of it, perhaps slightly unsettled, perhaps slightly expanded, something curious is happening. The ocean, if there is one, is using a wave to contemplate water, and maybe that is what a person is, not a machine that accidentally turned on, but a local brightness in something immeasurably vast, a storm that, for a brief moment, looks at the sky and asks where the rain came from.